And finally, we will leave the stage for our distinguished guests. And I would like now to invite our first speaker of the night, Mr. Dr. Khalidi, to present his speech and presentation for us. Dr. Khalidi.
Her Excellency, Ambassador, Mr. Fadl Rahman, and your colleagues who helped putting together this great event, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me talking to you about, on the occasion of celebrating a centenary of Afghan independence from the British colonial hegemony. I shall discuss to you, or I shall talk to you about what are we celebrating today, why is it important, its historical context. We are celebrating because it is important in our history, because it shaped our history, and its consequences still shaping our history. And it's still relevant on today's circumstances around Afghanistan, on the politics that shapes Afghanistan. It's still relevant. First, I would like to talk to you about a little bit about Afghanistan. As you can see, Afghanistan is located in southern edges of Central Asia. This is an important area in Asia. It's the hub. Many trade routes went through Afghanistan, from China, the Silk Road, to the Middle East, from India to the Middle East, and vice versa. And also this area was a crossroad of the invaders of various cultures. People came to this area, melted here. You see this triangle? Afghanistan is located in a triangle of civilization, ancient civilization, 6,000 years old. Afghanistan is located on the southern and eastern, the Indus Valley civilization, the two major cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, and in the north, which is the Bactria-Margiana complex. This civilization is 6,000 years old, at least. And this is an ancient time map. This is the Greek, produced by the Greeks who came with Alexander the Great, and then they created this famous period in history, but the Greco-Bactrian Empire. In this map, we could see Ariana located at the southern part of the Alps, the Amud area, and we could see Parthia, we could easily see India and Aracusia and Sophia to the north. This area, next one please. Now, that name is not invented by the Greeks. They took the name Arya from the Vedic literature, from Avestan literature. So we have a history of, which lasted 2,500 years. This is from 500 to 2000 before the Christ. That people of this area had a civilization, and they created so many cities, and people migrated around that area from this part, from Hindu Kush, the city Arya Norwegia was located in Hindu Kush. And they migrated south and east to India and to Persia, to Iran, and other places. Yeah. Now, we had, during a long period, we had the, as I mentioned before, the Greco-Bactrian Empire. Then we had the Koshan Empire, the great Hephthalites, and the followed by the Sassanid period. And we arrived at the Islamic era with great dynasties that, from our area arose, and they created dynasties that went from east to west, from India to India, to Iran, to Central Asia, and even up to Turkey. The Seljukis, the Ghuris, the Ghaznavis, they all famous names in history, which impacted many civilizations, many parts of the world, including Europe. We are at 1708. This is the time that the three gunpowder empires were in play. The Turkish Ottoman Empire, the Safavid Empire of Persia, and the Mughal Empire in India. At this time, in 1709, Hotikis from Afghanistan, this is the first indigenous dynasty who rose, and they created, carved a country for themselves. They defeated the Persians, the Safavids. They also took over the remnants of the Mughal Empire in Kabul up to the current day Pakistan. However, their reign was like 28 years long, succeeded by the Afsharis of Persia. But soon after, next one, the Durrani Empire came to existence, which is the state from 1747 that exists till today as a continuous country. This is why we take our contemporary history from this date. This country, which was created at the time, not necessarily name was Afghanistan, but Afghanistan name came into known by virtue of the demographics of people who lived there, by the virtue of the nature of the government which was in power. By 1779, this name was officially in many official documents in the countries of the area. And this, that empire once extended from the Caspian Sea to close to Lahore and Delhi, and from the Oxus to the Arabian Sea. Now, this country, unfortunately, Afghanistan came into confrontation with a colonial empire who took foothold in India, and that great Durrani Empire was reduced to current borders of Afghanistan. Now, this is why we are celebrating today the centenary of our independence, because we put to an end that 123 years of interference in the affairs of Afghanistan. So, 100 years ago, Amanullah Khan ratified a treaty which ended the Third Anglo-Afghan War. The treaty was discussed in Rawalpindi after the ceasefire of the Third Anglo-Afghan War. Now, some people may question whether Afghanistan was ever a colony or not, in its dictionary meaning. Even some important people question that, like Jawaharlal Nehru. He wrote that he didn't know why Afghanistan went to war with British India, the Third Anglo-Afghan War. And even the British themselves downplayed the war. They downplayed the war, even it was not included in the Treaty of Rawalpindi. After protestation by the Afghan head of the delegation, Ali Ahmad Khan, the head of the British delegation, Sir Hamilton Grant, which was the foreign secretary of the British India, he took a pen and took a piece of paper and wrote that with this treaty, we accept Afghanistan as an independent in its internal and external affairs. Second, with this treaty, all previous treaties between Afghanistan and British India were null and void. Third, from that day, the British would stop paying the subsidies to Afghanistan. So, this is why that treaty was signed on 8th of August 1990. By the time it was communicated to Kabul, and Amanullah Khan ratified it, it was 19th of August of the same year, or 28th of Asad, 1920. No. Now, okay, we see Afghanistan reduced from those territories, next one please, to this map. Can we go back to the first one? You see the British India in Bengal, this is 1781. British was in Bengal. Next one please. But in 1895, British got to the borders of Afghanistan. So 123 years, what happened? What this happened? Britain, when they were in Bengal, they were trying to extend the colonization of India. They had no adversary powerful enough to stop their colonial expansion. Afghanistan, Zaman Shah, was the only superpower of the area at the time. Maharaj of India and people of India asked him to assist Indians by expelling the British. They were able to pay 2 lakh rupees per day, the cost of the war of his army, of Afghan army, to fight the British. So British could not fight at the time. So what they did, they went by subversive. They went around. They went to Shah of Persia. They persuaded Shah of Persia to attack from the west. And they went also to the local adversaries in northwest India to oppose the Afghan state. So by the time Zaman Shah armies were in Lahore, the Persians invaded from the west. We had to go back. That is caused, and the British advised the Persians to help his brother, Shah Mahmud, and bring him to throne in Afghanistan as a puppet. For the next 40 or 60 years, these aristocracy, the brothers and the uncles, they all fought each other. And it all started was the British asking the Persians to assist Shah Mahmud. And he succeeded, removing Zaman Shah from throne, blinding him. And so Afghanistan misery started from there. So Afghan with British exchanges started indirectly, which was disastrous for Afghanistan. Now, the policy of the British at the time was to create chaos in Afghanistan, to reduce the power of the central authority. By 1838, there were 3 local powers in Afghanistan. In Kabul, Dost Muhammad Khan. In Kandahar, his brother Kundal Khan. In Herat, Shahzada Kamran. So there was no central authority. So this was time right for the British to go ahead of direct colonization. So they embarked the first Anglo-Afghan war. So they thought, is Afghanistan ripe for colonization? And they thought, whoever has control of the peaks of Afghanistan, that power controls India. This was historically true. So they sent armies from 3 fronts. Afghanistan, they succeeded in installing their puppet in Kabul, and the Afghan state collapsed. However, it was very short-lived. People of Afghanistan unite at the greatest time, the most despair time. They united and they created a condition for the British. They killed their emissaries. They created a condition that the British could no longer continue their occupation in Afghanistan. Finally, they agreed to retreat. And on the retreat, they were decimated. This is Dr. Bright. He is the only survivor from the whole British Army who reached Jalalabad. This is 1839. To tell the British that the British Army is gone. So, after the first Anglo-Afghan war, and Dost Muhammad Khan again came onto the throne, and he succeeded up to 1863 to reunite the country. He removed the Kandahar, the Herat and North were all united back under the authority of the central government. Once he succeeded, he passed away in Herat and he was buried. His son Sher Ali Khan became the king. Now, for the next 38 years, the British were just looking for opportunities to come back. At the time, they had this forward policy of colonial forward policy, and they wanted to install an envoy, an ambassador in Kabul, who should be a British or European descent, from European descent. They wanted to install that. they were afraid of the Tsarist Russia advances in Central Asia toward Afghanistan. So they sent Neville Chamberlain, who later became Prime Minister of the Great Britain, as envoy of Viceroy to take his office in Kabul. He was refused by the Afghan border officer. Because of that refusal, the British sent complete armies to install him or install an envoy by force. This happened in 1878 and 79. The second Anglo-Afghan war started. Again, the British got to Kabul. They surrendered Kabul. Ashir Ali Khan left Kabul. He went to north to request assistance from Tsarist Russia, which was not forthcoming. And he died over there. His son Yaqub Khan became Amir, and the British forced upon him a treaty, which is famous as Treaty of Gandamak. Remember, Gandamak was the place that the British army was decimated 38 years ago. Now, they camped in Gandamak and forced a treaty upon him, which required Afghanistan to accept an ambassador, which should be an European descent. Afghanistan should conduct its foreign relations through this envoy, and Afghanistan will receive subsidies in return from the British. However, this arrangement did not last long. Cunari, who was the envoy, was killed in Kabul. Afghan people again rose up, and the British had no chance but to return and retreat to India. So they agreed, instead of being a chaos in northwest frontier, the northwest frontier of British India, they agreed for Abdul Rahman Khan to take over. He was the nephew of Sher Ali Khan. Now, this is unfortunately one of our unfortunate times. Afghan people won the war, but they lost in diplomacy. Instead of enforcing our will on the British, Abdul Rahman Khan asked the British what they want, to leave us alone. And the British took the opportunity by grabbing by two hands. They said, well, if you don't like our ambassador, okay, forget about the ambassador. But you conduct your foreign relations through us. And you make a trade with India, okay, and we will pay you subsidies in return. Abdurrahman Khan accepted this arrangement. They said, leave us alone so that we could build our nation, build our state, because the state was wrong. So for him to have time, to opportunity, to build a nation government, build a state, he accepted. And British agreed that they will never put inside Afghanistan again. This is why Afghanistan, from that day, became a protectorate of the British Empire. We lost our foreign relations initiative. It was the British who was conducting foreign relations. It was the British who started negotiating our borders. Who, with Tsarist Russia, they demarcated the border. And with Persia, they demarcated the borders. And with India, they wanted a scientific, as they call it, a scientific border By scientific, they meant that India could be defendable, a border. So Sir Henry Durand drew a line through the mountains. So that was the time of the Great Gate, which between Afghanistan, between Tsarist Russia and the British, both claimed that to be Afghan friends, were caught, and Afghanistan became a buffer zone between the Tsarist Russia and the British India. Now, with regard to the British India, the Britain wanted another buffer zone between Afghanistan and British India. There was a law of British India passed in 1858. That law defined the British India border. There was a gap between those borders and Afghanistan. And those gap was the tribal mixed ones. Yeah. The next one, please. Yeah, this is the gap you could see is the FATA, the federally tribal area, federally administered tribal area. The green is part of Pakistan. This area was not part of the British India. By Act of India, 1858. When British gave independence to India and Pakistan emerged, Pakistan and India became inheritance of the areas under the British India. This is why Pakistan did not inherit this area. This gap exists officially in law. When Sir Murthy Durand, who was the Foreign Secretary of the British India, was asked after he signed the Treaty of Durand line, that to explain this line, he mentioned, do not make mistakes, this is not a border. This is a line defining the areas of influence by the Amir and the areas of influence by the British administrators on a tribal people who are free. These are not my words. These are words of Sir Henry Durand. It's published. It was, for some reason, not available before, but it's now publicly available. It is almanac. Reflected this. It's in the encyclopedia of that produced by Nancy Dupree and others. So he said, he defined it that this line defines the area of influence on people, and they are not subject of the British Raj unless they wanted themselves, or we accept that influence. And from up to now, these areas called of federally administered tribal areas. They are not part of Pakistan administration as such, because it was not. Britain could not give them this area. This was not there. So this was a limbo. And that reduced Afghanistan from all areas. Okay, next one. So what happened? We have 43 million Pashtuns in Pakistan. And we have about 20 million in Afghanistan, between 15 to 20 million in Afghanistan. This line was important because you could see the figures. These are from Pakistan census. Next one, please. Next one, please. Okay. Now, that Durand line, the issues of that time is still alive. It's still alive. It's still haunting us. And this is why even the United States has taken over the British rule of the 100 years, of 100 and so many years. Because these areas became lawless, they became they radicalized by the various stakeholders. Now, Declaration of Independence freed Afghanistan to embark a new era, to modernize, to engage with the world. Next one. And also, it introduced a lot of innovative programs, including emancipation of the women, new constitution giving equal right to people of Afghanistan, education for all, for women and men, and building a new city, new administrative area of Kabul. Next one. And that is Patel Talbek, with the residence of him. Next one, please. And he embarked a tour of Europe. Next one, please. This is in Germany, 1928. Next one, please. Yeah. So, this program of modernization, there was resistance inside Afghanistan. And first it started in Paktia by Mulai Lang, and then followed by Shinwar people, and then by Habibullah Kalakani, which is famous as Bachi Saqqa. And all of these three uprisings, none of them were political, none of them were ethnic. They were cultural. They were opposing elements of a culture which they thought was alien to the native culture of the time. There were problems with the implementation of the programs and definition of the programs. People got confused between modernization and westernization. Got confused between westernization and development. So there were elements of the program of the modernization which meant the dress code, which people didn't like. So Amanullah Khan was forced into exile. And next one, please. He was replaced by Habibullah Kalakani. Next one. He was from Shamali. And he was assisted to the throne by the clergy, by families, famous families of clergy, including the Naqshbandiya sector, all areas, the Mujaddidi families and others. He was actually declared crown by the Pir of Gulbaha, who was the person who declared crown uncle of Amanullah Khan in Jalalabad. So you see, there are a lot of corrections. So a lot of people were thinking that, or still think that these uprisings were the plot of British colonial in India. That there are a lot of elements of truth in this statement. However, we should not forget that Afghanistan culture, the traditions, how we relate to the world, and how we see modernization, and how there was a establishment, a structured establishment of reactionaries existed at the time. However, his rule was short-lived, 9 months, and he was replaced by Nader Khan. Now, some people might think that why, if popular support he had, why it was short-lived, 9 months? The reason is, first, the Pashtun tribes rose against Amanullah Khan because of cultural issues. But once they realized that the traditional, historical power of the aristocracy was lost from the Pashtun hands, they couldn't sit idle anymore. So the first person who emerged, a famous Pashtun in Nader Khan, who was the defense minister, Barik Zahid, he was, all Pashtun tribes of the tribal belt rallied around him. Another element is the Mujahidi family and other clergy who realized that under Bachi Saqaw, they could not sustain, their support on their interests in Afghanistan. They had a lot of connection with the aristocracy, these clergy. So they would lose all of their privileges in long term. So they supported Nader Khan. Nur al-Mashayikh went to Paktia and met Nader Khan and met Shah Wali Khan. This is evidence in Shah Wali Khan's book, So what happened? All the programs of Amir Amanullah Khan were stopped. Schools were closed. Development programs were stopped. And the rule of Sharia rule became the law of the nation. Constitution was stopped. And taxation reforms were stopped. So we went back to the backward, and the path to the future was very bleak indeed. It would take 30-odd years or more for Nader Khan and his son Zahir Shah to re-establish those programs which was initiated by Nader Khan. So it took us Afghanistan 30 years back. So, next slide. From the independent day till today, we see a continuation of a struggle between good and bad and the ugly in Afghanistan. A continuation of the same thing. Those who opposed Amanullah Khan, they revitalized, reinvigorated during the 1980s, thanks to the Western nations' help to our 7 Tanzim in Pakistan and also in Iran. These were the elements who opposed Amanullah Khan. They reinvigorated, and once they got into power, they couldn't even form a government. A chaos, an anarchy, which reduced the country. Again, we have central authority was lost. Central authority, this struggle between a central authority, state, and chaos, and Muluku Tawfi, we call it, or local warlords ruling in the areas, was a continuous struggle till today. Now, after 2001, after American involvement in Afghanistan, we see the same, scenario is repeating itself. Those Taliban, 6 years or 5 years rule, established a medieval type of government in Afghanistan. No constitution. Mullah was judge. So many executions anywhere. No element of modernization was allowed. Actually, modernization for clergy is a defeat. They never accept modernization. Any facet of modernization is a defeat for the clergy. So that was then and it is now. Now we are at the crossroads again. The time is frozen in Afghanistan. We came full circle again. Americans removed Taliban, now Americans are bringing them back. There's no principle in play in world politics. There's no principle. Democracy, rule of law, women's rights, these are all, fake. For powerful countries like the United States, it doesn't matter. As long as you play with their rules, you just adhere to their interests, you're right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are back to square one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khalidi, for showing such a clear picture of what happened in the past 100 years of history in Afghanistan and also its consequences on today's Afghanistan and the region. As I mentioned before in my speech, all the audience will have time for questioning our honorable guests. And we will give the time after all the three speeches when they are finished. We will now hold a 5 minutes break and we will come back soon. Thank you. یو 15 دقیقې پاوزه کوو دمه اخلو بیا بیرته په خپل وخت بیرته هیله کوو چې بیرته راشي په خپلو ځایونو کې. مننه.